what were you attracted to, or what were you attracting, right,
Mhm.
on both sides of the fence? That was, and what also made you think that those were good decisions, or at least temporarily good decisions at that time?
Yeah, I think like when we're first dating, we just don't, a lot of things we're doing, we subconsciously and consciously have observed. So a lot of it comes back to childhood. A lot of it comes back to what you observe with your caregivers or your parents and how they showed up in relationships. So I kind of was looking for my dad in pieces, but then I went through a rebellious period. So I was looking for something opposite of my dad. So I was kind of screwing myself there, but that's another story. But so when I first was dating certain people, I would be like, okay, he's really cool. I like him. I'm attracted to them. We have chemistry, but maybe he was emotionally unavailable. It took me a long time to realize I needed someone who was going to be emotionally mature. Like it took me a minute to figure that out. And there were guys around me that were showing me that, but I couldn't see it because I was looking over that for other qualities. So I learned to really kind of dial into attributes that no matter what happens, if we lose everything, like how is this person? Like what is
Yeah.
their compass to rebuild, or what is their work ethic, or what is their are they humble, do they have a good sense of humor, are they compassionate? So I had to go deeper, and I think a lot of times we go very surface. So things that could look good on paper, that's why we'll see couples hook up, we're like, man, they look good on paper, but then it's like it doesn't work because we're looking at these like very shallow things
Yeah,
that really can change over time, but that don't tell you like who that person is within
definitely.
themselves.
The paper never has a full description.
Never ever.
The paper never has a full description. Even teams, they say, "Oh, it looks good on paper," but
Mhm.
then they don't go anywhere.
Well, I think about that the baseball movie where the guy discovered how you could recruit people and you didn't have to have a team of stars. Remember that? And
Oh wow.
it was more about the teamwork, and it was more about like, okay, how did they balance each other out? And then I was watching the documentary on the football player that man, he had the drug issues. I can't think of his name, and he was really talented oh he out of Texas. Can I think of his name? Because he has significant like drug issues and things like that. Was that you can't do it alone. So even though he was dynamic and he was getting it done, it wasn't sustainable.
Yep.
The most powerful teams we see even now that are successful, they know how to play their part,
They have.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So I think I think that's a good example of just like I'm trying to think of what my thought there was, but just how you need the partnership, the teamwork,
Yeah.
in any.
So there were some. So there were some qualities or behaviors or habits that you were looking for that might have resembled your father, right?
Yeah.
What are those, I guess, core values that he held that you felt were or feel are, very
Yeah.
sacred?
So my dad has passed away. So
Rest in peace.
yes, thank you. But he just had great like work ethic. He did what he said he was going to do. He was consistent. Like if you ever had crisis, he was there for you, and he had that relationship with other people within the community too. So like when my dad and my mom passed, they had like over 2,000 people that attended their funeral.
Wow.
So they just like that giving spirit, just that ability, that wisdom. Like he didn't always tell me the answer, but he made me a critical thinker. He made me kind of like figure. He'd be like, "Okay, what do you think?" And like, "Why don't you research it and let's talk about it?" So I think when I was looking at men, I was always attracted to someone who intellectually stimulated me. So I was like, "That's my dad." And then I was like, "Oh, can they be consistent?" That was harder to find. And then I was like, okay, can they like protect me and can they create a secure environment? Not that I need them to do everything, but is there going to be a balance there? So those were things that kept coming up recurring with who I was looking at.
So what were the qualities that you were kind of um like falling for that overshadowed those traits?
I think like what looks good on paper. And then also, I would say
Like
like
a physical attraction?
physical attraction, just like the image. Also, I think, I'm trying to think back on it's sometimes chemistry. Like, I think sex messes people up a little bit because it feels good in the moment, but it can give you a false sense of security because it's sending things to your brain. Like, sex can be just as addictive as drugs. So, the same things that are being hit your dopamine receptors, the oxytocin releases that you're getting from this person can mislead you, which is why you see a lot of people who come in strong and then they get together and they're like, ooh, like there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on because it's
Yeah.
almost like they're blinded to it. So I just think you have to you have to keep that in mind. Like the sex could feel like sometimes like physical attraction and chemistry can be a red flag because people can come in so hard on that angle and then they can manipulate well there. But then when you really get to know them, you're so deep in, you're like, wait, who is this?
You're actually like, where am I?
Right. What is
Where
going
did I just
on?
go to?
But it's confusing because as humans, we do want to be attracted to the person. We do want to have some, you do want to have a good chemistry with them physically. So I think it's a balance, though, of like sometimes delaying that gratification to get to know the person because it's more clear when you don't sleep with someone. It's clear. It's like you're like, it's easier
I
for people to
really
walk
don't like
away.
you.
Right. It's clear. It's clear when you don't sleep with someone, you're like, nope, this is not it. But when you sleep with someone, you're kind of like, well, I kind of feel a little fuzzy. I mean, maybe we could work through this.
It's like it's funny because it's like it's almost like you're damned if you get it, you're damned if you don't, right? Because if you get somebody that you truly, truly like, but they ain't knocking your boots off, you might just be like, I don't need to listen to you, or I don't need to even be around you or deal with this, right? When you get into those frustrated moments. But then on the flip end side, that person who is, doing his due diligence inside the bedroom, it could kind of eliminate whatever issue that y'all might have had. Like
True.
just one session. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if it's fuzzy or if it's healing. No, I'm kidding.
I know you are. Kind of, sort of.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Sounds like you had a personal experience with this, but go ahead.
I mean, because they say that like what's it? There was I forgot what comedian guy said this, but he did a stand up and basically said like he was homeless, so he had no choice but to have good sex. Right. And that always supplied a roof over his head. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
All right, so like everybody gets fed up to a point, right?
Mhm.
Like when you get fed up with your results, that's what's really like your transitional period, right? When you might have experienced the same exact result that you didn't like 10 times, and that 10th time you're like, I am done. Right? It's usually sometimes it's even more than the other 9,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's just the icing on the cake. So I'm saying all that because what was your fed up moment if you in your dark ages?
So I'm gonna tell you what happened, and this is, I have to credit somebody for this. One of my friends. So I was at this point, like I had everything. I was successful. I'd done well, with my daughter, raising her, and I was like, I went on this trip to Jamaica. I was sitting in this 5-star beautiful resort, and I was by myself. And not that you can't go on a vacation and have fun by yourself, because that ended up being one of the most interesting vacations of my life.
I know,
Because
Stella.
people kind of took me in and like took care of me, but not like in the way you're thinking. 'Cause it wasn't a Stella moment or anything
I'm
like
just
that.
messing
I know.
around.
But no, I remember calling my friend and being like, "Thank you for," because my friend owned the timeshare or whatever, and I was talking to him. I'm like, "Thank you for the letting me have this experience." I said, "It's beautiful here, but I just feel so sad." And I started telling him like, I said, "I just wish I could share this with someone," because I didn't realize I was like in the honeymoon part of Jamaica. I think it was in Montego Bay or something. So like everybody was just getting married or together, and he was like, "You do it to yourself, huh?" It's on you. You have opportunities, but you're not picking the right people. And that person had never said anything critical of my dating or anything before. But I just started kind of really thinking about it and kind of doing an inventory. And that's a part of like what I coach a lot. It was on me. Sometimes when you're in a bad situation, it's on you because like there's a quote, you're 50% of the problem, 100% of the solution. You can always remove yourself from a solution. And that's when I realized, I said, you know what? I'm picking people like I know aren't totally emotional available, but they may have these other criteria, or I know that they really can't give me what I need. Why am I afraid of getting what I want? And it's like when I changed that and I just started approaching it differently, my life, it changed dramatically because I just became more aware. And I think a lot of us walk around kind of in an unconscious state about our relationships. We just go with the flow and, but we know in our heart, we're like, this ain't totally what I want. And so it was just that moment that I said, you know what? Yeah, I made it. I've done all this stuff, but I want to share it with someone.
Yeah. I realized that like people have grown accustomed to not having their desires. Right? So like since a kid, most people don't get or don't have what they want in life at all, and most people, especially as kids, are told no. So like they don't even really I guess would be conscious enough or woke enough to even say, okay, cool, I am the determining factor of my solution,
Mhm.
because we're so used to living without our solution.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a great moment for you. Um,
And can I add something? I
yeah.
think people are conditioned, even in relationships, to not know what good looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is I've had conversations with people where they're like, I'm not supposed to hit somebody when we're fighting. Like, but if they don't hit me, then that means they're not passionate about this relationship. I'm like, no, 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 that's not how it goes.
Wow.
Right. Or there's people out there that didn't have a father figure or a mother figure and they still desire it so hard. So they kind of keep getting into situations because maybe their parent went through something, they had a drug issue or drinking issue or whatever, and they end up in these codependent relationships and they don't know anything differently because this is what they've lived. It's been their norm. So, dysfunctional can become functional, to your
Yep.
point, without people it really being their fault per se. But I do think that once you do know and you have a sense like, okay, this is not working for me, this is not making my life easier, that's when you have to wake up and become a little more conscious and unnumb to it, right? So
Mhm.
you can change it. So I think some of it's just circumstance with people.
Yeah, and willingness.
Yeah.
And I think there's always a breakthrough moment. Not always, but for those that have the breakthrough moment, it's always got to be something from, you know, a really just a lost place. I think like for me, like I had to admit to myself that I was lost for me to understand that I need direction.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to admit that they're lost
That's
because we
true.
all think that we figured it out,
Mhm.
or we all think that we have the solution of a problem that is actually just going to be an ongoing problem, or a growing problem. So I think that when you have that moment, that's when you're like, okay, cool. Well, I am lost because I'm seeing everybody else do this, right? Or I'm seeing everybody else have this, I should say. And
Mhm.
I know I have the ability to obtain that, which is how I'm kind of viewing. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. If you're in a place where you're looking at a bunch of couples on their honeymoon,
Mhm.
which also is probably the highlight of their relationship,
Right, right.
right?
It is. It was.
Yeah, it's the highest of, so you're like, well, damn, I want one too. Like, and
And I think at that point, I had been through like so much. We all have our embarrassing moments, like of what we've done in relationships, and for people, and we're like, I will never do that again. But like
yeah,
sometimes you got to go low, you got to go down through that experience to not do that experience again. But I think you're right. I was around, like, they're like, you're here? What are you here for? I'm like, I'm just taking a trip. And it was literally people's honeymoon. I'm like, what are you here for? It's my honeymoon. It's my honeymoon. We're celebrating. I was like, oh, okay. And I think it kind of like, it did. You're right. I was like, I'm getting people's high moment too. I think that
yep.
was part of it. Yeah.
So, question, right?
Hmm.
Being that you've been through the dark stages, or
My dating dark
your
ages.
dating dark ages, I should say, your DDA, right?
I like it. It has an acronym now. It's growing.
Right. You have an experience of actually going through the rock bottom and coming out on top, and a lot of people may not be able to communicate that,
Mhm.
and really help people navigate through that. So when you're with your clients and whomever, friends, how do you feel, or how do you go about, I guess, talking to them about knowing where they're heading, with whatever behaviors that they're displaying?
I think like I'm really grateful for my experiences. It was not fun to go through those experiences, but I think it makes me highly empathetic. But also I can sense and read things pretty quickly with people. So with my clients, for me as a relationship expert, it is hard because I can see them hitting the wall over and over and over again. And people don't always come. I want to be honest about it. People don't always come through it very quickly. It takes time. But I had actually a couple of messages over the last couple of days from clients where they're like, I really thought about what you said. And like, this is changing my life. It was worth it for me to go down and like be introspective and figure out my stuff, own my accountability in the relationship. But it doesn't happen overnight. So I don't want to sell it like, hey, now you're aware of your, relationship blind spots. You're going to be all, a-okay. I think it's a process. So when I'm talking to people, it's me reminding them, of what good could look like, of why they want to be invested in it. Warren Buffett always says the like top two decisions you make in your life, one of them is who you choose as your partner, because it affects you physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, financially. So a lot of times we're spending so much heartache in situations we just don't need to be in. They just don't make sense. We know we need to get out of it, but we just feel like I can't, or I feel dumb that I have to talk to you about this because I know it's dumb that I'm dealing with this maybe, you know, and it's not dumb because it's human, and we're, as humans, we have emotions and it's complicated. So it's funny. I do have clients that, like, I had a coaching session a couple weeks ago, and my client said to me, "What year was it that I said that this relationship wasn't right for me?" And I was like, "It was on this date," because I remind people it was on this date at this time that we talked about this, and this is what you said. Now, what's changed? And they said, "Yeah, I always knew," but it didn't. That person didn't get out that relationship right away. It took them years
Yeah.
to get out. Yeah, it takes people time because you're changing a behavior. And so first it's like I feel like you're taking people through steps. First you have to make people aware or more conscious of it. Then people will have to like think about it and process it. Then they have to kind of experience it again. Some people quicker than others, but it
Yeah.
just takes time to change those things.
So what about, I want to kind of bring this full circle with today's topic, right?
Yeah.
So what about when you have a person who is choosing you just as much as you were choosing them, but they're still wrong. They're still the wrong person for you.
Tell me more. Like, what does that look like? So you both are mutually interested, but how do you know they're the wrong person for you?
Well, because like maybe they just have like habits or behaviors that are not actually like benefiting you or could be detrimental to you, but that person still shows up for you, day in and day out.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're like, for example, let's say there's a guy, the bad guy, and a good girl likes the bad guy. Usually, like those bad guys are very loving,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they love that girl, they treat her with respect, but his habits outside of that house
Are not good.
are not good.
Yeah.
Right? So he's still showing up and he's choosing her, which is making her probably saying, okay, well, he's here for me. And although he may be, he's also doing things that could technically put them in harm's way or just put them in a bad situation. Um, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how would we, or how would you communicate to somebody that, hey, listen, I know this person does love you. He demonstrates or she demonstrates um, their love to you, and they display all the different things that you're asking for, but that they're just not a good person outside of you.
Yeah. I think we can have sometimes blind loyalty in relationships. So like it's kind of like, but that person was there. They were there. And that could,
Yeah.
and if we really are about the loyalty, that could weigh in pretty heavily. But I think in that situation, I would say, okay, let's do an inventory of like what you want in a relationship, what you need. Let's talk about what a healthy relationship looks like. And then let's talk about what your relationship looks like. And I would compare with what's important. If they have children, it's even more important because I don't think we think about this a lot, but we have love legacy. Like my parents left me a love legacy. My grandparents, I saw them going through it and pushing through it and staying the course, right? And staying committed to each other. Learn, they have disagreements, but they would show us like how to talk things out and then let it go or to regroup and talk about it. I would also impress on that person, like, what legacy do you want for your children? Because your children are always watching and observing. So a lot of the cycles that we see that are dysfunctional in families is because it just keeps going from generation to generation, right?
So it's a love legacy that's been passed down that is dysfunctional in a sense. Wow, that's dope. I actually saw Jordan Peterson. I'm gonna paraphrase what he said, but he actually said something very similar. He said that parents fighting an argument is borderline essential,
Yep,
realistically,
it is. Yeah.
because especially like when you have kids,
Mm-hmm.
because they need to understand that a fight or an argument, not a fist fight, but like
Right.
a
Right.
debate or
Constructive argument.
yeah,
Yeah.
constructive argument should
Healthy
not
friction.
exactly
Mm-hmm.
should not be like, you have to be able to process it, handle it, and deal with it, and realistically problem solve that, because it's almost inevitable,
Yeah.
throughout your life, no matter if it's with your loved one or whether it's with your partner or coworker. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely do think that that's great.
I think it's super important. I've worked with people where they never saw their parents argue. And
Yeah.
so guess what their mechanism was? They would disappear or they would just not argue. They would just go away. They didn't know how to have that conversation. And they didn't realize it until we really talked about it. Like I never saw my parents have any healthy friction or have a disagreement. So I really didn't know how to weather that. And the way they watched their parents deal with it was, one of the parents would like leave or
Wow.
avoid. So I think that's something that is, important for people to learn, that there is going to be healthy friction. You can model it in a good way for your kids so that when your kids have things they don't agree with someone on, you're actually teaching them good skills of dealing with conflict as well.
But I think that we get into this point where we want everything to be perfect.
Yeah, there's no perfect relationship. I know people get really like confused by social media, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, this picture, I see these pictures of this thing," but I always say that's one snapshot in that person's relationship, and it's probably their best snapshot. What you're not
Yeah.
seeing is the fight that may have happened before the picture or after the picture, or how the kids did this that created this
Yeah.
dynamic of conflict. So I really feel like it set us up for like this false sense of what happens in relationships. I think relationships are full of like imperfections because we're imperfect as humans. So, and
Yeah.
happiness is so fleeting. Like it's an emotion. It's up and down. Like every day, even within ourselves, we may feel really great one day, but not so great the next day. So we measure our relationships that way. We're kind of doomed because it's two people with emotions, right, that go different ways.
Yeah.
I think there's periods of relationships where people like are in good place. I think there's times where you're just fighting with your partner. It's just like you're agitated, and I think there's parts where it's very bored. You're bored. Like it's just normal. It's nothing really exciting happening. I think all of that's the normal part of a relationship.